Psalm 91. This is a great psalm and a great subject tonight. The secret place. The secret place. We're not going to read the whole psalm right now. Let's read all 16 verses to start, and then we'll go through it. Psalm 91 and verse 1 says, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked, because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For He shall give His angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Because He hath set His love upon me, therefore will I deliver Him. I will set Him on high, because He hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation." The secret place. First of all, what is the secret place? What is the secret place? He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Now it does say the secret place of the Most High. The secret place of the Most High is simply living where God is. Living where God is. There's a physical way to look at this, and then there's the spiritual way to look at this. The physical would be, as is also referred to in other psalms, is talking about the tabernacle or the temple. That there's a special place of dwelling in His tabernacles. And so that place of worship was a special place to the psalmist, and the psalmist found closeness to God there. Now you could also kind of compare that in a physical sense to when we come to meet in a special place for worshiping the Lord, for gathering together, for the purpose of meeting with God. And our desire should be that when we gather together as a church, that we meet with God, that God would meet with us, that there would be something special that takes place. Now some people have this attitude, well, I can just meet with God, I can worship wherever I want, I can go out into the woods, I can go this place, that place, and wherever else. And so they somehow think that that is a replacement for gathering with other believers. But that is not a replacement, that is complementary. Because in your daily life, where you're not going to be in the place of worship all the time, as far as a place of a corporate assembly, you're not going to be in a place of assembly every time or every day. So what do? Well, there needs to be a secret place, you dwelling with the Lord, being close to the Lord. The best way, the main ways to be close to God is through prayer. That's the one main way, is just communion with God through prayer, talking with Him. It's not always just having a prayer time, but it is an awareness of God and a communication. Just like I mentioned about the mice, all I did was, as I'm walking out, the thought came to my mind, I need to ask God to bless these mouse traps. And so it wasn't like I had this long drawn-out prayer time, like, okay, now it's a prayer time. No, it was just stopping for a moment, talking to the Lord, and then going on. That's an awareness of God's presence within the believer, God's presence there, being close to Him, that just as you have someone, maybe a human, that you are another person that you are walking with, that you are close to, that you get to know, that is what God desires for His children. That we would just simply get to know Him and commune with Him in a greater way. And so that our closeness to God would even transcend all other human relationships. Human relationships are important, but none are as important as our relationship with God, our communion, our closeness to God. Because as life goes on, there are times when there are people who come into and out of our lives. We might get to know people for a while, and then we might not commune with them as closely. But God is that constant all throughout life. As your life goes on, there are people who have grown up. They've gone to school. They go to high school, and what's usually said. Now, this is what I've heard said, not to me necessarily, but I've heard this. Is that, the friends in high school, we're going to be best friends forever. We're just going to be, and guess what? Everybody goes to a different college, and you know what? You make different friends. And so then what happens? The person graduates from college, they go their different directions. And then there are people who maintain those connections over time, but some are close friends throughout life, depending on where they are geographically and what happens. But very often, though, at least in my experience, I know my wife's experience is this way, our lives, the friends we've made in years past, in college and in other times, there are times when we don't have too much contact with them anymore. The closest contact we have is, I got a friend request from your old college friend on Facebook. Wow, hadn't heard from that person in, 10 years. So things change in that way, but the one constant is the Lord, the relationship with God, the secret place. And guess what? The secret place is a necessary place, that closeness to God, living where God is. That's dwelling. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I've given examples in the past of these ladies in particular, these older ladies in the faith, these older women of God, women of prayer, and actually not just women of prayer. I've mentioned my wife's grandfather, who was a great man of prayer, over 90 years old, but just a man of prayer. And those people, the reason they have such a richness and a depth is they dwell in the secret place. That's the key. They have just as much, they have the same type of connection to God that we can have, and that we do have, but they take advantage of that. They dwell there. And so God is there, and they just have this, there's something about certain people these prayer warriors, these older saints that are prayer warriors, they have found the secret place and they live there. That's the way I would want to be when I'm older. I would want to be that way now, but people who've lived on earth a long time, they might not be able to do a lot of other things, but they can still pray. And they are some of the most important people, actually. Even though they're not out, they aren't physically able to get out and do a lot. But they're some of the most important people because of their prayer lives. But those people dwell in the secret place. They are close to God. There's a richness, there's a great treasure there in the example. And so there's the physical example, and then there's the spiritual of our awareness with God and being people of prayer, and then also being in God's Word, because closeness to God comes by knowing more about Him and knowing more of who He is. And the more intimately you know someone, the more rich and special a relationship is. There's a greater connection, there's a greater closeness. And so that secret place is very important. But there are some characteristics about this secret place that we see in this psalm. And first of all, it's a place of shelter. It's a place of shelter. Verse 2 says, I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him will I trust. Refuge. Picture a storm. But then you find a refuge. One of my favorite things to do is use my imagination when I've been out on trails before, different parks that have, maybe you've been on a trail where you see this big boulder that kind of sticks out, this big rock that sticks out, and there's a spot underneath you can get under that rock. It's right along the trail. And I like picturing wonder what it'd be like to spend a night out here and it's rainy and it's stormy, but I get under that rock and I find shelter. It's just, for some reason, it's just for me, it's a neat thought. I kind of like that thought, but that's the way God is. That's who God is. He is a refuge. And then He's a fortress. Think of a castle. There are some impressive castles that have been built in this world, and they're just amazing. That's who God is. He says, my God, in Him will I trust. So there is the complete trust in the Lord, the declaration of trust in the Lord, as the psalmist says, my refuge and my fortress. Verse 3 shows us not only is it a place of shelter, actually let's go back to verse 2. I missed number 2, a place of trust. It's a place of trust. So when you've got it's a great thing to be able to trust someone. Trust is very important. Without trust really, a lack of trust hinders relationships. Trust is important between husbands and wives. Trust is important between parents and children. Trust is important between friends. Trust is important between co-workers. And, working in a financial institution, you just have to take precautions. As a security officer, the head of security for the bank I worked in Connecticut, his motto was, and he was a former state trooper, but his motto was, don't trust anyone. Don't trust anyone. And he even gave us a little object lesson of that he had a security meeting the one day, and he had a sign to say that we had attended the security meeting. But in the midst of that, he had a paragraph of writing there that nobody read, or maybe one person caught it, that said, I commit to buying, so-and-so a cup of coffee for him every day or every week. And we were signing this paper. And he's just showing, don't trust anyone. You need to read what you're signing. And this is true, you should read what you're signing. That is important. He's making that point. But there are times when people prove themselves to be untrustworthy. And there are people that we do trust then at times let us down. And so then we might have a harder time trusting them. And so that is a part of the human relationships. But being in the secret place is a place of trust that we can fully, 100% without reservation, trust in the Lord. Now, sometimes it's hard for us to do because we get so used to having to have our guard up with other people. Like, you trust to a certain extent, but there's still that caution there because nobody's perfect. Somebody might let you down. There might be someone who you don't know that well take advantage of you. And so there are levels of trust there are times when people shouldn't be trusted. But then there are times where trust is very important. As I was saying, as at the credit union is, we have to take precautions. We have to lock our drawers. We got to lock our screen. We got to do things. And there have been employees of financial institutions that have done not so good things. So there are precautions because human nature. You just don't know who's capable of doing what. And so at the same time, it's still a healthier work environment when there is a trust there. There is a trust. For a new employee like me, there's probably a need to build trust, more so than those who have worked together for a longer time. But trust goes a long way in even the workplace. Trust is important in a church, among both church members and then between a pastor and the members or other attendees. Trust is important in the church. Whenever there's a breakdown of trust, whenever there's a breakdown of trust in government, as far as individuals in government, some people say, some people think that we should trust government. Well, actually, government's one of those things the founders really never meant us to trust government. So in that way, there's a healthy distrust because the natural tendency of government is to want to take more power, unless there's a conscious decision made of those in charge to the contrary. But government itself, by nature, thrives on gaining more power. So yes, but trust is a major thing. So, but there are limits to the trust we have with human relationships, but with God, it can be unlimited trust. That there doesn't have to be that guard up, there doesn't have to be that reservation, but that if I'm the God who saved me, the God who provided a way for me to know Him and have fellowship and communion with Him, the God who promises to meet my needs, I can have an unreserved trust in the Lord. So that no matter what our human relationships are like, we can still have unreserved trust in the Lord. It's a place of trust. The secret place is also a place of deliverance. Verse 3 says, "Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence." And now I was looking into this, the noisome pestilence, and that's disease and the something that can be very devastating to people, and to, when we think of pestilence, maybe think of livestock, but I just copied down the thoughts from the commentator Robert Barnes, and he says, the fatal pestilence, the pestilence that spreads death in its march. That is, he can prevent its coming upon you, or he can save you from its ravages while others are dying around you. This promise is not to be understood as absolute, or as meaning that no one who fears God will ever fall by the pestilence. For good people do die at such times as well as bad people, but the idea is that God can preserve us at such a time, and that as a great law He will be thus the protector of those who trust Him. And according to him, it says, "It is to be remembered that in times of pestilence, as was the case during the prevalence of the Asiatic cholera in 1832 and 1848, very many of the victims are the intemperate, the sensual, the debased, and that a life of this kind is a predisposing cause of death in such visitations of judgment. A large part of those who die are of that number. From the danger arising from this cause, of course, the virtuous, the temperate, the pious are exempt. And this is one of the methods by which God saves those who trust in Him from the noisome pestilence. Religion, therefore, to a considerable extent constitutes a ground of security at such times, nor is there any reason to doubt that in many cases also there may be a special interposition protecting the friends of God from danger and sparing them for future usefulness. The promise here is substantially that general promise which we have in the Scriptures everywhere, that God is the protector of His people and that they may put their trust in Him. In other words, that doesn't mean that Christians are never going to have problems, they're never going to have sickness. But those who trust in the Lord have the opportunity to see God deliver and work in miraculous ways even when others are facing the disease, pestilence, whatever it might be. And that is what God can do. And the point he was also making here is there are things that basically just simply a Christian who is living for God and lives a certain lifestyle that is not like the world automatically is exempt from certain things because they aren't going to be exposed to certain things, certain diseases, and that if you just live clean, you live right, you're not going to get the same things, that is likely to get the same things. So there is a special protection there as well. And certainly in these days, we need God's protection. There are a lot of things out there, a lot of diseases, a lot of things that can ravage the body. It's a place of deliverance. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. Now the snare of the fowler is that one who would set a trap. Set a trap. You know what? Those who are trusting in the Lord, God can give that special blessing to spare us and help us to avoid those traps or deliver us from those traps, even when there are attempts made to trap us. It's a place of deliverance. It's also a place of protection. Verse 4 says, He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. It's a place of protection. I love the picture of covering with His feathers and under His wings. Now, there's a wonderful hymn called Under His Wings, a very good hymn. But under His feathers. So the best picture I had of this in real life was when we were probably a couple years ago, a few years now, we were at the Butterfly Conservatory in South Deerfield. And they had a little room before you go in where the butterflies are. It's Magic Wings, it's Magic Wings. They had this little room where They had some other animals before you go into where the butterflies are, and it's a very nice place, very relaxing to go in where all those butterflies are. And one of them had these little birds. They were miniature something or other. I don't remember the name of the bird. But I do remember seeing the mother, and her wings were kind of moved out like this, and I couldn't really see anything else. And then all of a sudden I look, oh, there's one baby. There's a couple babies. Oh, there's a couple babies in there. Oh, wait a minute. No, there's more in there. At first, I couldn't see them at all. So the picture here is not just simply, I'm going to cover you, I'm going to hold my wing up like this and cover you. No, it's actually, you are going to be so underneath God's wings that others can barely see you. And I could barely, if it weren't for just the little legs poking out down at the bottom, I wouldn't have known there were any babies in there at all, other than just seeing that something's off with the wings. But that is the protection that God provides for those who trust in Him. He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings shalt thou trust. Notice then the end of verse 4, His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. It's a great thing to believe in absolute truth. It's a great thing that absolute truth exists, because if the absolute truth exists, you can simply just stand behind the truth. You don't have to make the case yourself. You don't have to go into contortions to try to prove something. You just simply stand for the truth. You stand behind the truth, and that is enough. The truth is the truth. Even in this day of great doubt and not absolutes, but a lot of relativism, moral relativism, no absolutes. It's just you make up what your own truth is. Notice that it says, His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. It's not about what I say is the truth. It's a matter of what God says is the truth. Truth is the truth. It's a great thing when you can just stand behind the truth and it be your protection. The buckler is like a shield, but it has more to do with surrounding, not just a small piece, but more surrounding in a larger sense. Place of protection. And also, number 5, it's a place of confidence. Verse 5 says, Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness. So being a place of confidence, a lot of people live fearful. A lot of people live fearful. A lot of people are afraid. Sometimes people live afraid and they don't really even realize they're afraid. They just kind of get used to living that way. And sometimes people think that they're thinking logically, but in reality it is fear that's driving them. And my phone popped on, but it was not a text from my wife, so I don't know why it did that, but anyway. People live in fear. And I don't expect that to get any better. We live in such a world, and we live in such a country where literally we have news media that stirs up fear in people. Pretty much most of the news media is stirring up fear. I don't know if it's a grand design to make the people fearful, but that is a byproduct. It's just there's always something bad happening, and the byproduct of that is fear. And if a person does not have closeness to God, if they don't dwell in the secret place, if there's even a Christian who doesn't dwell in the secret place, Christians can live in fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of what might happen, fear of speculation. They might speculate and then get fearful. They might get fearful of potential. It could be financial ruin. What if the economy collapses? What if all these things happen? There's so many what ifs. A lot of people live in fear of what we are going to die in 10 years or 12 years if the world is going to be finished if we don't do something about climate change. A lot of those people are living life in fear. Why? Because they don't have the Lord to trust in, to have confidence in. And so if they don't trust in the Lord, then there's a lot of reasons to fear. I was actually talking about this to my wife. I had never gotten, it's been a long time since I've had a vaccination. I'm even overdue for a tetanus booster. It's been long. I'm way past the 10 years for a tetanus booster. I don't remember when I had a tetanus booster last. And then I actually just finally got in with a primary care appointment with the primary care doctor, and they said, "Do you have any records you're transferring?" I said, "It's been so long since I've seen a primary care doctor, I have no records." They said, "Okay, well, nice and easy then." Well, I had mentioned this before. Maybe you were here, maybe you didn't. But the new policy at the nursing home at Poet Seed is you need to have for the winter months, you need to have a flu vaccination, or you need to wear a mask if you're going to be there. And so for me, singing and preaching there with a mask on is not really a good option. So I kind of knew, well, if I'm going to stay there, if I'm going to keep going over the winter, my only other option is to get a flu vaccination. Now, there are a lot of people who are opposed to getting a flu vaccination. I'd never gotten a flu vaccination before. And there are also different stories that people have had of flu vaccinations and other types of vaccinations and certain things like that. But I decided I was not going to let the flu vaccination or the lack thereof keep me from ministering at the nursing home over the winter. If that's my only option, that's my only option, and I'm going to do it. So, and there are all kinds of things out there. If you look at Facebook and all the things that people put on there, that some of this stuff's just crazy, really. Somebody said, I don't remember what it was, but it was like, if you think such and such, then you need to go get a flu vaccination, or you're due for your flu vaccination. Almost like you're loony, so you need to go get a flu vaccination because you're loony enough to get a flu. There's all kinds of stuff out there. And then I see news that says the cases of OCD have skyrocketed over the last 3 decades, and at the same time, the number of vaccines given to children has been multiplied many times. So there must be a connection between OCD and the increase in vaccinations. And I look at that. Number one, there is no scientific measure. That's a circumstantial evidence. And I'm not saying this for or against vaccines. There are different people who have different opinions about vaccines, and that's fine. I have my own opinions. But the point is, a lot of that is driven by fear. Some of it, there have been problems people have had, and there's some real, it's okay if people have concerns about possible side effects. That's very legitimate. But I'm telling you all this to say, my experience was, I decided I'm going to go get the flu vaccination so I can keep ministering at the nursing home. So I went over to Rite Aid. And what I didn't realize was that I was actually fearful of getting the vaccination. I was fearful. Now, because why? Because I didn't have any intention. I was thinking more in terms of what we do with vaccinations for our children. Thinking more about them. I didn't realize I'd be the one put in a position to get a vaccination. So I walk in and I'm thinking, why do I feel fearful? Is it because of being jabbed? I didn't want to be jabbed. It's been a long time. I didn't even remember what it feels like. Is it because I'm afraid of side effects? Some people have said they get the flu after getting the flu vaccine. I've heard several people say that, but the official word is the flu vaccine cannot cause the flu. Some people would disagree with that because of their own experience. I don't know. But I walked in and I'm thinking, I actually feel fearful. Like my life might come to an end or something. No, it wasn't that extreme. I'm thinking, what's going to happen? So I just went through, I got it. I had to wait a few minutes and they got it ready and I got it. And barely even hurt. It was just a little pinch, kind of the way they used to be. Now that I remember, oh, that's right. It's just a pinch. And I got it. But I told my wife, I was talking to my wife about this, and I said, I couldn't believe after I got it how liberated I actually felt. That I actually didn't feel fearful. And so my thinking is, my opinions on the flu vaccine are, in my mind, are very logical. In my mind, they're logical. But in reality, there was a little bit of fear there when it came time for me to actually do it myself, that I didn't realize was even there. And then I felt very liberated thinking, wow, I didn't realize that was hanging over me like that. And I did pray, before I walked over there, I prayed asking the Lord for protection against any side effects and those types of things, any side effects or complications from the vaccine. And so I did pray about it. So what was the answer? Pray about it. Pray about it. But even after I prayed about it and I walked in there, I'm like, wait a minute, I can't believe I feel this way. This is really surprising. This is strange. But that lifted after I actually got it done. Does that mean I would just rush out and get a flu vaccine every year if I didn't have to? Not necessarily. But the point is, there are a lot of things that are driven by fear rather than our trust in the Lord. And we all have different decisions to make about various things, so I'm just telling you my story in that way. Not saying you have to go do the same thing. I'm just saying I had some fear in my life that I didn't even know was there until it was actually exposed, confronted and exposed. And what did I have to do? I had to just turn it over to the Lord. Place of confidence. Having confidence is very empowering. Fear is paralyzing. Being afraid is paralyzing. But a lot of people are paralyzed by fear. They're paralyzed by being afraid. So he says, he says, thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night. What is the terror by night? That is attacks and dangerous things that cannot be seen approaching. There are just things that blindside you. You have no warning that it's coming, so you have no opportunity to prepare for it. It's just there. That's what it would be by night. That's why I might be scared if I were under that rock, during a storm. There might be an animal out to get me or something. No. Terror by night, because at nighttime, there's a lot that could make people nervous. That's why at Halloween time, there's a fascination with darkness because of being scared and being fearful. The arrow by day. That's attacks and dangerous things that can be seen approaching. Which one's better? Which would you rather have? I don't know. Get blindsided by something, or there's trouble coming, and I would say most of us would say I'd rather see the trouble coming, but then we might be fearful before the trouble even gets here. So what do? Confidence in the Lord. Pestilence, that's plague and disease. It says, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness. The pestilence, the plague and disease that cannot be seen until it comes upon you. And then there's also destruction that wasteth at noonday. That's those things which are out in the open. So kind of some parallel things here. But the point is that it's a place of confidence. The secret place is a place of confidence. Verse 7, 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. The one who dwells in the secret place, whose confidence is in the Lord, there might be people falling around you, and this in the sense of battle, or in the context here, maybe battle and those types of things, but then pestilence and disease too. That's not battle, that's pestilence. Don't just think that because something happens to everybody else that it's going to automatically happen to you. Take the example of an economic calamity. God knows how to take care of His people, even in the midst of hard times. Now, times have been good in America in the last number of years. People have had it a little bit better, but there's a lot of people who still struggle. He says in verse 8, only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. So there we bring in the wicked into the picture. And earlier on in the Psalms, we see all the time the contrast between the righteous and the wicked. And so you picture yourself, you're the one standing for God, you're the one trusting in the Lord. And the wicked, the ones who don't know God, they face the destruction, they face the calamity, they face the problems. God knows how to take care of His people. In verse 9, because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There we go, habitation, dwelling there. You've made the Lord, which is your refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee. There shall no evil befall thee. Whenever, there's a great saying that the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. And it's a true statement. The safest place to be is at the center of God's will. Because if He wants you protected, He's going to make sure you're protected. For He shall give His, now notice verse 11, for He shall give His angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. So, in that way, there may be such thing as guardian angels. He shall give His angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. That was the verse the devil quoted, verses 11 and 12. The devil quoted Matthew 4 in the wilderness when Jesus was in the wilderness. The difference is He left out to keep thee in all thy ways. He's just saying, show off, Jesus. The angels are going to protect you because they'll bear thee up in their hands lest thou dash thy foot against the stone. But it wasn't according to God's will for Jesus to jump off the pinnacle of the temple. The safest place to be is the center of God's will, not just giving into temptation of the devil and showing off. And let's keep reading here. We'll finish up. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Because he hath set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. Now, the most important thing, we're not guaranteed a long life, but we are guaranteed a long life. We're guaranteed eternal life. But humanly speaking, the best thing we can do is to submit ourselves to God's will and say, God, I'm going to trust you without reservation. I want to have complete confidence in you, because confidence is empowering. And the wicked, they drum up confidence, and they have confidence, a misplaced confidence in just continuing on with their wickedness. And God's going to take care of that. God's going to judge that someday. But for the believer, we need to have confidence in living right, to following the Lord, to walking with God. And that is very empowering, that we can move forward with confidence, with knowing that God is with us, we are with Him, we're trusting Him, He's going to take care of us. The secret place, closeness to God, living where God is. That, yes, it's important for us to meet together and meet with God. But on a daily basis, you can dwell in the secret place. You can have that constant awareness of God, that constant communion with God, whether it's your personal prayer time or whether it's just going through your business. You have that awareness of God and communion with Him. Spending time in His Word, getting to know Him better through His Word, knowing His will, what He pleases Him, and getting built up, edified through the Word of God. The secret place. I know I need to spend more time in that secret place. I know I need to not get so encumbered about with the cares of the world, have my eyes on the things that are going on in the world. And let's examine our lives tonight, our hearts tonight. How much do we dwell there? How much do we live where God is? Yes, we know as believers, we're sealed with the Holy Spirit. We have God living in us. But as far as our daily life, our walk with Him, do we live where He is? Do we live trusting Him without reservation? Do we live going to Him, running to Him for shelter? Do we live under His wings? And do we trust Him for deliverance? And do we have utter and complete confidence in Him that then empowers us to continue going on with life, fulfilling His will, pleasing Him step by step, and going through day by day? That's the blessing of the secret place. So let's dwell there.